Morning guys, thanks for tuning in. As you may or may not know, I had a pretty banner turkey season this spring, and I have a lot of memories that came from it. Also got a few tail fans from my dad's first turkey ever, my dad's first public land turkey, my first out-of-state turkey. It's something that I want to preserve and give me something and him something to look back on and just kind of spark that memory every time we look at it. With that said, I'm going to be showing you guys how I do my turkey fan mounts, how I do my beards, and how I like to do the spurs as well. It's some awesome stuff, so I really hope you enjoy it. Okay, so first things first is supplies. You'll need a cardboard box, a bowl of water, dish soap, borax, auto body filler, pins, a knife, pants hangers, a wire brush, a sawzall, your turkey spurs, beard, and fan, and a vise. There's also some craft supplies that you will need, but there's a full detailed list of the supplies in the description. Alright guys, once you've gotten all of your supplies squared away, you got everything that you need. It's a little bit of a unique situation for myself this year, but this process will be the same no matter how many beards or fans you're going to do. I got all my beards here on a plate separated so I don't get them mixed up, and I like to get the borax on them as quickly as possible. Borax will usually keep the bugs off of them and let it dry for a process. This is just a good way to use your time wisely because these don't need a lot of attention. You can take them and pull them right off the bird once you've killed it, trim a little bit of the meat away, and then put them on borax and let them sit for the entire time you're doing your fans and spurs. So I'm just going to pour this borax in here and get them nice and lathered up. Again, this will just be for keeping the bugs off and keeping them nice and preserved. And then I'll just set these aside and let them sit for as long as I need or whenever I finish the fans. Just make sure they're nice and covered. Those are good to go. Alrighty, once that you have gotten your beard squared away, you take your tail fan. I'm not going to go into how to remove it. It's pretty straightforward. There's a joint at the back that you find and just kind of slice it right off. There's quite a bit of meat still on here, and to do this properly you need to remove all of the meat that you possibly can. All of the fat, all of the tissue in between the feathers to the point where it's just the skin and the membrane holding the feathers together. So it's quite a lengthy process, but it's something that you really got to take your time with and do correctly so that you can mitigate the amount of bugs that are going to be on your mount over a long period of time. So let's get started on that. You need your blade. I like these little box color arts and crafts type blades. They're really sharp. You can get extra ones. Just get this stuff at Walmart and it's pretty cheap. It's like $1 or $2 for all this, and the sharpness really helps for just a time sensitive kind of project like this. So really only need this and potentially a wire brush if you really want to get into it. You can do it without it, but I like using that. And then lastly, there is a part of the backbone that is still connected to the fan. I like to use a pair of loppers to cut those off. You really don't need them. You can probably just use a pair of pliers to break it off, but this is nice, clean, and easy, and that's what this is all about. So let's get started on cleaning this bugger up, and I'll get back with you once I got it all cleaned out. Okay, as I'm getting into this fan, I've taken most of the muscle off of the front of this fan. This is the very front, so if you're looking at the bird, this would be facing you. There is a gland that is here at the base. You can see it just at my finger here. That needs to come off completely. You need to make sure that you get all that off, and then all of this yellow is fat. That needs to be removed, as well as all the muscle and fat on this side, in between the feathers, and just keeping the skin that holds the feathers together here. That's the only portion that you want to keep. All the yellow, all the red needs to come off. And as you can see here, between my fingers, this is that part of the backbone that you might need a pair of pliers or loppers or some sort of little saw just to get that removed and make this a nice, beautiful flush mount for your plaque. Alright guys, as you can see, I've cleaned off a lot of the meat here. Just the fat left between the feathers, which I will use with the wire brush to get out. And you can see in the middle here between my thumbs, there is a good chunk left, and that's that bone that attached to the backbone. And like I mentioned, I like to use a pair of loppers, and you can get right underneath it and just kind of snip it right off. And as you can see, pretty clean removal. Now I can just get in there with my knife. And there's also just a small portion of that bone on the front that I like to get in there and try to snap off as well. Just be patient with it. You can cut the feathers as long as it's below where the skin membrane is that you're leaving. But there, as you can see, there's still fat in between the feathers, but there's hardly any meat left. And just use your wire brush and little knife and work into each one of those areas, the gaps between, and get it all out of there, and then you're ready for the next step. All right guys, as you can see, most of these gaps are pretty cleaned out and it's looking really good. This is something I'm gonna move along with now. If you are a little worried about some residual stuff, I really like to go back with a wire brush and just push all of this stuff out, just to get those gaps right in between nice and clean, because that's really what your best friend is going to be, is getting this stuff nice and clean before you move on to the next step. But as you can see, pretty much all totally cleaned out, and just the skin up top keeping it all together. So time to move on to the next step. Okay, now that these feathers are all cleaned out in between, most of the fat and the tissue is gone, I like to set it on a plate. Again, since I have so many, I've got everything labeled so I don't get stuff mixed up. Then I take our best friend, Borax, and just pour it on there. Try to get every feather covered. Make sure it gets underneath so it's getting that back side. And I'll leave that set for as long as I can and get started with the other fans. If I don't have any other fans, I'll usually leave it for a few hours, maybe a half day. But the less meat you have on here, the less you have to worry about leaving it dry for a long time, with my method at least. So, got all that situated. Gonna set this one aside and get started on the next ones. Alrighty guys, now that I've gotten all the fans cleaned up, they're on the borax, they're gonna dry for at least a few hours. I'm gonna get to working on the spurs. There's plenty of ways to preserve the spurs. You guys can go about the internet and find whatever way you like best. This is the way I like to use them best. I think it looks the best. It's really versatile. You can do a lot of different things once you get to the finished product. So I got my own way set up pretty nicely. It's real quick. I take just one at a time. I got a vise here. I just put it in nice and snug, like so. Don't have to squeeze it too hard. Then you can go in with your Sawzall and go right through it. I go with the foot first just because it makes it easier, and I can go in on the other side. I keep about a ½ inch on either side of the spur just to give me some room to play with, and should be left with 2 pieces to discard, and then you have your finished spur ready for cleaning and boiling. So we'll get to that next. Alright guys, got all the spurs cut up now. Really nice and neat here. Gonna stick with the one that I've been focusing on. As I mentioned, I usually cut like a ½ inch on either side of the spur, so you end up with something looking along these lines. Now clearly we've still got some stuff going on here, so what I'm going to do now is come through and take all of this skin off, pull the tendons out, because anyone who knows turkey legs knows there's a lot of tendons in there. So I pull all these tendon out, and then this spur itself is actually a cap on top of the actual bone. So I will come through and just enough to get under the skin all the way around, and then work this spur off of the bone. And there's a membrane between the bone and the spur that's underneath there that I like to get off. I'll show you guys all this, just walking you through it right now. So let's get started. Okay, as you can see, I've cleared most of the scaly skin off of here and the tendons. Just a little before and after. Before is this, like this one. Still everything on it. And after, this is what it should look like. Still haven't taken the actual cap of the spur off, but I'll save that until I finish getting everything off this one. So on to the next one. Alright, these are both cleaned up nice and good, ready to go into the little boiling mixture that I have. It'll be hot water and then peroxide to make them white, and I'll walk you through that when we get to it. Alrighty folks, this next step takes us indoors. This is right after we finished cleaning all of the skin and tendons off of these spurs. We've cut them, they're nice and clean, but they still have some meat and a membrane and what's underneath the cap that's on that spur. So what I've done is I've taken some water and added about a tablespoon of Oxi Clean. This will help as a degreaser for the bone. And I have each one's laid out. I'm going to just do one pair at a time, throwing them in the boil for 5 to 10 minutes just to loosen that skin and membrane off. And then I can take them out, let them cool, and then work the rest of that off and clean them pretty much all the way. It shouldn't take more than 10 or 15 minutes to do all that. All you really need is a pot, water, Oxi Clean, and potentially a pair of pliers to get that little cap of the spur off. So let's get started. Alright guys, I got the spur out of the boiling water. Here's what I was talking about. Tried to show the camera nice and close. So these are both the little caps that are on the bone of the spur. You can see, so like this was on top of this, somewhat like that. Now you can see the discoloration. That's a membrane that needs to come off to get this all the way clean. So I'll just take a tiny screwdriver or something and just scrape all of this meat off, get it totally clean and ready for bleaching it white. Alrighty folks, as you can see, spurs are all cleaned up. The bone has no meat on it, even on the inside. Make sure to get that out. It's all nice and cleaned off. What I'm going to do is take these spurs, but not the caps. You do not want to do this part for the caps because I like to keep that character. Each one has its own unique kind of color. But you take the bone part, so both bones, and I wash them or actually boil them in this peroxide mixture, which is actually the exact mixture that I use for my Euro mounts. This is 40% by volume hydrogen peroxide and water, a 50-50 mix, which is this stuff right here. So I'm going to take this, put it into my pot, bring it to a boil, and then dump each one of these spur bones into there to make them perfectly bleach white. Alright guys, got it going to a boil now. This is that peroxide mixture, and as you can see, all of these spur bones have been separated to each one of them so I don't get them all mixed up, and we're just going to dump them all right into this mixture. So just grab every single one of them and give them the dunk. Now I'm just going to let them sit in here for, I don't know, maybe 10-15 minutes. I'll keep an eye on them. I don't really have a set time for them, but once you see them getting bleached nice and white, that's about the time you're going to want to take them off. So just leave them there, probably 10 minutes. So I'll get back to you guys once these are nice and bright white. Alright, it's been about 10 or 15 minutes now. These are right at the level of white that I'm looking for, nice and clean looking. So I'm going to pull them out of here, rinse them in water, and then throw them into each one of their little containers. So real quick step here just makes the final product look really, really nice. So once we get these into the containers, let them dry off, and we'll get back to the tails and start washing those. Alright guys, now that the spurs are all taken care of, they're pretty much totally done and off to the side drying on their own. It's time to move back to the tail fans. They've been on the Borax for at least 8 hours now, and this step in itself is optional. If you shoot a bird on a rainy day or you're hunting in the bottomlands and you got a really dirty fan, I tend to like to get some warm water and some dish soap and just dip the fan in the warm water mixed with dish soap, rinse it off, run my fingers through it, and then lay it out to dry. It doesn't take too long to dry, but it ends up being a really good looking fan. Again, you could forgo this step if you have taken pretty good care of your fan and it's looking good, but I just like this step. It really brings the whole finished product together. So I'm gonna get to washing this, lay it out to dry, and got 3 more after. Alright guys, just to give you a visual, I've rinsed this tail fan, and I take some pants hangers. These ones in particular are wooden ones that kind of clamp on. They work really well to spread the fan out. You can see the feathers are nice and wet right now, but if you get, I have a blow dryer, you can set them up and let them air dry if you have the time, and just let these feathers dry all the way out, and they end up looking really nicely. So got to get this hung up, dried, and get started on the other ones, and I'll get back to you in a few minutes. Alrighty, got it all dried out here. It's looking pretty good. The feathers are looking real clean. Now the next step is to get out your cardboard and your pins, and I'm going to pin this up the way I want it to be mounted. That way I get a good idea, get it set up exactly the way it should look, and by then it should look really clean. And I'll bring you along step by step, of course, but this one is done. Got a few more that I will be cleaning and others that I won't. So gonna get started on this one and keep you guys along with this exact fan. Okay guys, now I got the fan laid out here the way I want it, and I'm gonna start pinning up the feathers so that they stay in place for pretty much the final steps in this. That water, it makes it look like crap at first, but if you just stay patient and blow dry it on nice and low warm heat, you'll end up pretty awesome finished product. So it's a little difficult to do this out here with the wind, but the next step is I heavily recommend for the next step that you do it outdoors. So I'm gonna do a little time lapse here, me pinning this up, and then I'll get with you guys when we're ready for the next step. All right, got it all pinned up here. It's looking nice and full. It's the way I'm wanting it to look. And this next step is most of the reason why I'm outside for this, because this is some pretty potent stuff, and you don't want to be doing it inside because you don't want to be breathing it all in like that. It is auto body filler, and this is how I managed to make this process so quick. Instead of leaving this to dry for weeks, if you just mix up some auto body filler and put it on the ends of the feathers that you cleaned, it'll seal it up real quick, it'll set everything, and then you can put it right into your plaque that you want to do. So it's a real quick method. All you do is follow the directions on the auto body filler, and then blop a drop right in the middle, spread it out and let it set, and then flip it over and do the other side, and it's good to go. Now once you're placing this onto the feathers, you'll have a few minutes to make some final touches, and then just let it set up into the feathers. The only thing about this is once you set it on the feathers, it's a ticking clock that you don't only have a set amount of time before it sets up, and then it's the way it is. So I'm liking the way it looks. Gonna give it a few minutes to set up and then flip it over. Okay, got the front finished up. Now I'm gonna flip it over. It's flipped here, and just gonna place the same amount in this area where the feathers are and let it sit, and then it should be done. So you're just gonna mix up this auto body filler right now. Okay, both sides are set up. The feathers are looking great. And as you can see, this thing is stiff as a board, and it's ready for any kind of plaque you want it for. Or you could just throw it up on a wall like this if you really don't care about a plaque. I mean, it's pretty much finished product. So the fan is finished. This stuff is still not all the way set up. You want to give it a little longer time. I think the directions say 30 minutes, but it's solid now, and it's only been like 10. So this thing seems to be totally done. I'm real happy with it. I got a few more to do here, and then I'm moving on to the spurs, which don't need much attention, and lastly the beard, which is by far the easiest part. So pretty much closing up now, so almost done. Okay, now that the tail fans are all done up, pretty much done, time to go back to the spurs. Real simple step here, shouldn't take more than a couple minutes. First of all, you want to go through the peroxide. Will dye everything or bleach everything white. So just make sure you got all that residual meat, anything that you missed off of there. These are pretty good. Again, sticking with same bird, first bird of the season. Definitely a 2-year-old. Got short little spurs, about a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. You can generally tell which one goes on which, but that'll be what the finished product looks like. I'll let you know why I'm keeping the shotgun shells, but now is the time to take the hot glue gun, or you could also use super glue for this, but I like to just do one pump on the inside of it and then slide it on there, and it should adhere right away. You don't really need a lot for it. It's not like these are getting bumped around too much. I started doing this probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and the first one I did, haven't had any issues with it. And it's okay to go overflown, so if you could see there, it's a little over in there. So once it dries, I can go through with the knife again and just cut that away, and it'll be real clean. So set these aside again, and now coming to the shotgun shell. This is how I like to display the beard, so I will remove all of the plastic shell part and keep just the brass. And it could be a tedious process, but the sharper knife helps. And I just go through and remove on this shell it's all black, but whatever the plastic casing part of the shell is, it really isn't all too much. So you're left with just the brass. So this is how I'm going to display my beard, and I'll move on to that step in just a sec. Okay, now for the final steps here. I got the beard. I've tried to take as much of the borax off of as I can. Now go through here and put a good amount of hot glue into the shell, and then seat the beard into it and let it set up in that. And then I will go back and fill in the open space with more hot glue so it gets a real nice hold on it. First couple of times I did this, I did have the beard fight me a little bit, so I'll go in here and fill these gaps as much as I can with hot glue so it gives a good hold. Because as I was saying, the beard fought me a little bit my first time doing this, but once I filled in all this space, it really held, and it hasn't given me any issues since. This is a real cool way to display the beards. I'm a big fan of it, and like I said, any overflow or any of this like stringy stuff that comes from hot glue, you can just cut off at the end. But this is the shell that I shot the bird with, holding the beard. Really nice beard. And then the 2 finished spurs, you can display them however you want. You can glue them onto the plaque. I like to take a piece of string or leather and run it through the middles of these with a bead, and then put them side by side with the beard in between. It looks really nice. But that's pretty much it for the turkey mount, and I'll do a whole full summary here in a minute once I get the rest of these finished. Alright guys, the project's pretty much finished now, but I figured I'd show you how I mount these beards and spurs the best way I like it. So I got some wooden beads here, and also some leather strap, just stuff you can find at Walmart or Michael's or stuff like that. But before you use that stuff, you need to get your beard out. So here's my beard from my public land bird opening day in Virginia this year, and I have glued it into the shotgun shell that I shot it with. So this is just the brass, obviously, but you guys have seen that steps hopefully. If you haven't, rewind, check it out. It's definitely a cool process. But in order to string it all together, we need to put a hole through this brass. Kind of difficult, it can be a little cumbersome, but it's relatively easy. So I got my drill here, and just gonna real quick drill a hole through here and then show you guys how to do the next steps. Alrighty guys, as you can see, got my hole drilled all the way through, and now you can get your spurs out And the order I like to do is spur, then wooden bead, then the shell and beard, then wooden bead, and then the last spur. So I think best practice is you don't want to cut your leather until you already have it all strung up, so you get an idea of how long you want it to be. Like I said, spur on first, right through where the marrow is, and that bone should have been cleaned out, but run it through there, then run through a wooden bead, then you take your shell and press to go through here, run it through there, and then another wooden bead, and then the last spur. So get end product like that. It's a little longer than I'd like. All right, somewhere around there. Then you take a knife, cut that, and just like that, you got a really cool looking mount and setup for your beard. You got the beard, the spurs, and then some decorative wooden beads. Doesn't look too flashy, and I've got some places around that I can just hang this up at, just tie a little knot in it, and that'll be all she wrote for this. Alrighty guys, that is the beard and spurs all done, as well as the tail fan. So these will be together, and a pretty awesome mount for my first public land bird. I didn't have the time, nor do I have a full idea of how I'm going to do it. So as for a how-to to get your tail fan ready and your beard and spurs ready, this video is pretty much done. But in the end product's going to look like something along these lines behind me. These are two of the birds from the last couple of years of hunting. And what I really like to do is take pieces off the property that I killed the birds on and create a plaque off of that. It's something just to create a little more in the memory when you look at these pieces up on your wall. Guys, I really hope you give this a try. It's really not that hard, and it's really a lot of fun to do. It took me less than a few hours, and that was with 4 fans. So with one, it shouldn't take more than a couple. Let me know if you guys give this a shot. Guys, I appreciate y'all watching, and I'll see you from the woods next time.